The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly cast reveals what most fans never figured out. Few westerns have etched themselves into cinema's collective memory, quite like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Clint Eastwood's squinting gaze, Eli Wallach's frantic energy, and Lee Van Cleef's chilling presence remain as iconic today as when they first graced screens in 1966. But behind the legendary standoffs and Ennio Morricone's haunting score lies a production fraught with challenges that transformed both the film and its cast in ways most fans never realized. What if I told you that the actors barely spoke to each other during filming? Or that the movie's most memorable moments were born from near catastrophe and last-minute improvisation? What if the iconic Man with No Name was almost a man with no role, and that this film nearly ended careers instead of defining them? Let's pull back the curtain on one of cinema's most celebrated westerns and discover the blood, sweat, and creative warfare that unfolded off camera. The story behind the camera reveals a film that should have collapsed under the weight of its troubles. This is the untold reality that reshapes how you see every frame of Sergio Leone's masterpiece, revelations that the cast carried silently for decades. 1966 marked a cinematic revolution in the Western genre. As American Westerns grew increasingly formulaic, Italian director Sergio Leone was busy reinventing the genre from across the Atlantic. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly would become the third and most ambitious entry in his Dollars trilogy, following A Fistful of Dollars and For a Few Dollars More. The Italian film industry was experiencing its own renaissance. With lower budgets but boundless creativity, directors like Leone transformed limitations into stylistic signatures. Shot primarily in Spain's Tabernas Desert and at Rome's Cinecittà Studios, Leone's vision was to create a Western unlike any before it, grander, more operatic, and unafraid to expose the moral ambiguity of the American frontier myth. United Artists had distributed Leone's earlier westerns to surprising success in America, but they remained skeptical about his increasingly epic ambitions. The studio feared American audiences wouldn't connect with an Italian director's cynical take on their most mythologized genre. Leone, however, insisted on pushing boundaries further with each film. In the scorching Spanish heat, three actors from wildly different backgrounds would converge. Clint Eastwood, already established as Leone's taciturn gunslinger. Lee Van Cleef, whose career had nearly ended before Leone resurrected it in For a Few Dollars More. And Eli Wallach, a method actor from New York's theater scene who had never set foot in a European production. None of them could have predicted how this film would forever alter their lives, or how close it would come to destroying them in the process. Clint Eastwood's stoic Man with No Name became the blueprint for a new kind of cinematic hero. Yet the reality behind this iconic character reveals a surprising contradiction. The actor who embodied this unflinching killer was, by 1966, increasingly uncomfortable with the role that was defining his career. "I was becoming concerned about being typecast," Eastwood later admitted. Leone kept pushing for less dialogue, less emotion, more mysterious. "I wanted to show range as an actor, but he wanted me to become almost a symbol rather than a character." What most fans don't realize is that Eastwood nearly walked away from the trilogy's final chapter. After two films with Leone, communication between director and star had deteriorated significantly. Leone's limited English and Eastwood's non-existent Italian meant that most direction came through interpreters, often with critical nuance lost in translation. Van Cleef, meanwhile, projected merciless confidence as the villainous Angel Eyes. In reality, the actor was battling chronic pain from a near-fatal car accident years earlier that had left him with a partially fused knee. The physical demands of Leone's long shooting days often left him in agony between takes, pain he channeled into his character's cold intensity. Lee would be in tears from the pain sometimes, a crew member later revealed, but the moment the camera rolled, he transformed completely. None of that suffering showed on screen. Perhaps the greatest contradiction existed in Eli Wallach's portrayal of Tuco. The acclaimed method actor brought manic energy to the role of the Mexican bandit, a character that required him to perform dangerous stunts without preparation or proper safety measures. Behind his seemingly carefree performance lay genuine fear. These men projected iconic archetypes on screen, but behind each performance lay a private struggle that would only intensify as production continued in the unforgiving Spanish desert. The defining creative decision behind the good, the bad, and the ugly wasn't made during pre-production planning or careful script writing. It came during a crisis that nearly derailed the entire project. Leone had initially conceived the film as a two-character standoff, continuing the partnership between Eastwood and Van Cleef from For a Few Dollars More. The third lead, the character that would become Tuco, was added almost as an afterthought when the script felt unbalanced. This seemingly minor adjustment would completely transform the film's dynamics. Originally titled Two Magnificent Rogues, the script was hastily expanded to accommodate a third lead just weeks before shooting began in early 1966. When Italian star Gianmaria Volonté declined to return for a third Leone Western, the director made a critical pivot. Instead of casting another European actor, he looked to American talent. Enter Eli Wallach, a Brooklyn-born character actor known for his intensity in The Magnificent Seven and How the West Was Won. "I wasn't Leone's first choice," Wallach later admitted. "I wasn't even his third choice. But sometimes the most transformative elements come from necessity rather than design." The decision to cast Wallach fundamentally altered the film's chemistry. His Tuco, talkative, expressive, unpredictable, created the perfect counterbalance to Eastwood's minimalist performance and Van Cleef's calculated menace. What began as a compromise became the film's greatest strength. Leone quickly recognized the potential in this unexpected dynamic. He began expanding Tuco's role, giving Wallach more screen time and many of the film's most memorable moments. The script evolved daily, with Wallach's character becoming increasingly central to both the narrative and the film's emotional core. This 11th hour casting choice didn't just save the production, it transformed a good Western into a transcendent one. But the improvisational nature of this decision would set a precedent for the chaotic production that followed. The breathtaking vistas and perfectly composed shots of the good, the bad, and the ugly belie the grueling conditions under which they were created. The Spanish desert locations reached temperatures of 115 degrees during summer shoots, with cast and crew working 14-hour days with minimal breaks. Leone was obsessed with authenticity, a vision that often came at his actors' expense. The infamous scene where Tuco runs through a cemetery searching for the grave containing gold was filmed after Wallach had been awake for over 24 hours. His exhaustion wasn't acting, it was real. Leone would never tell you exactly what he wanted, Eastwood recalled. He would keep shooting take after take until you were so tired you stopped acting and just existed in the moment. Then he'd say, "That's it. Perfect." The language barrier created constant confusion. The international cast and crew included Italians, Americans, Spaniards, and Germans. Often, directions would be translated through 3 different languages before reaching the intended recipient, with crucial details lost in translation. Water was scarce, accommodations were primitive, and medical care was virtually non-existent in the remote shooting locations. When an actor fell ill from food poisoning or heat exhaustion, which happened regularly, filming simply continued with adjustments to the shooting schedule. Most shocking were the safety risks Leone routinely imposed on his cast. Wallach narrowly escaped death multiple times during production. In one scene, he was supposed to be executed by hanging while seated on a horse. The horse unexpectedly bolted with Wallach still tied by the neck, dragging him away before crew members could intervene. During the bridge explosion sequence, a miscommunication about timing meant Wallach was still in position when the charges detonated. He was showered with debris and temporarily lost hearing in one ear from the blast. For the iconic bathtub scene, Wallach's character sits with a gun drawn as a one-armed assassin enters. Unknown to the actor, the prop gun was loaded with blanks that could have severely injured him had he been in the wrong position when it discharged near his face. These weren't carefully choreographed stunts with safety protocols. They were genuine moments of danger disguised as filmmaking. The toll on the actors became evident in their performances. The exhaustion, pain, and simmering tensions translated into the character dynamics that made the film so compelling. And yet, none of these challenges compared to the battle that awaited in post-production. The true artistry of the good, the bad, and the ugly lies in details that casual viewers rarely notice. Subtle choices that transform the film from a simple Western into a cinematic masterclass. Look closely at the final three-way standoff in the cemetery. Most viewers focus on the rapid cuts between faces. Leone's famous extreme close-ups of eyes narrowing and hands hovering near guns. What they miss is how the circle in which the characters stand gradually shrinks with each cut. The actors took small steps inward between shots, creating a subtly increasing tension that viewers feel but rarely identify. Leone had us practice that sequence for days, Van Cleef later explained. Each step had to be precise, each position perfectly aligned with the tombstones. The geography of that scene was choreographed like a ballet. Another easily overlooked detail appears in Eastwood's costume. His iconic poncho grows progressively dirtier throughout the film. This wasn't continuity error or neglect. It was deliberate. Leone insisted that the poncho never be cleaned during the entire shoot, allowing it to accumulate authentic trail dust and weathering. By the final scenes, that poncho carried the literal remnants of every location the character had traversed. Perhaps the most significant hidden detail lies in the sound design. Morricone's score is justifiably celebrated, but few recognize how the music functions as dialogue replacement. With minimal spoken lines for Eastwood's character, Leone and Morricone created specific musical motifs that essentially speak for him. The famous wah 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 theme doesn't just announce Blondie's presence, it communicates his attitudes and intentions when the character himself remains silent. These aren't merely stylistic flourishes. They represent Leone's understanding that cinema communicates on multiple simultaneous levels. The conscious mind follows the plot, while the subconscious absorbs these subtle cues, creating a viewing experience that feels inexplicably rich and immersive. Now here's where it gets complicated. These artistic triumphs emerged directly from the production's greatest challenges. Behind the camera, the good, the bad, and the ugly became a battleground of competing visions, with Leone at the center of nearly every conflict. The most persistent tension existed between Leone and Eastwood. By their third collaboration, fundamental creative differences had calcified. Eastwood, who would later become a director himself, increasingly questioned Leone's demanding methods and seemingly endless takes. Clint and Sergio barely spoke directly to each other by the end, a crew member revealed. They would communicate through assistants even when standing a few feet apart. There was professional respect, but personal exhaustion. Leone's vision required extreme precision, often shooting a simple exchange from multiple angles over several days. For Eastwood, who valued efficiency and naturalism, this meticulous approach felt indulgent. Their philosophical differences about what made a scene work created a silent power struggle that influenced every aspect of production. United Artists executives presented another source of conflict. The studio had approved a standard-length Western, but Leone was shooting an epic nearly 3 hours long. Weekly footage reviews triggered increasingly urgent messages from Hollywood demanding cuts. Leone would smile, nod, and then continue shooting exactly as he intended, recalled a production assistant. He knew they couldn't replace him mid-production, so he essentially held the film hostage to his vision. The most explosive conflicts involved physical risk. When Wallach nearly died during the bridge explosion sequence, several crew members threatened to quit. Leone's response was to minimize the incident and continue shooting the same day. This cavalier attitude toward safety created moral dilemmas for many working on the film. The cultural divides ran deep as well. American crew members found the Italian production style chaotic and improvised compared to Hollywood's structured approach. Meanwhile, the European team considered the Americans rigid and uncreative. These frictions created daily mini-crises that required constant negotiation. What's remarkable is how these behind-the-scenes battles translated into on-screen chemistry. The genuine tension between actors, filtered through Leone's composition and timing, created an authentic sense of distrust between their characters. The conflict wasn't just endured, it was harnessed. As production finally wrapped, a more significant battle was just beginning: the fight to preserve Leone's vision in the editing room. The crowning irony of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly lies in its American release, and what was lost in translation. After Leone completed his cut, a sprawling 177-minute epic, United Artists executives were horrified. For the American market, they demanded severe cuts, ultimately slashing the film by nearly 30 minutes. Scenes providing crucial character development and narrative coherence were discarded in favor of a faster pace and more action. The bitter irony? The film that became celebrated as a classic wasn't the film Leone actually made. When first released in American theaters in December 1967, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly ran just 148 minutes, with entire subplots and character moments eliminated without Leone's approval. More ironic still was the dubbing process. Though Eastwood and Van Cleef spoke English on set, much of the international cast delivered lines in their native languages. In post-production, all dialogue needed to be re-recorded for consistency. Eastwood and Van Cleef dubbed their own voices, but Wallach made a shocking discovery when called to the dubbing studio. "They'd already dubbed my voice with someone else for the Italian version," Wallach recounted. "I had to fight to dub my own voice for the American release." The ultimate irony came in the critical reception. American reviewers initially dismissed the film as a violent, stylistic oddity, a European imitation of a fundamentally American genre. Bosley Crowther of the New York Times famously called it a sheer horror of sadism and violence. Yet over time, those same distinctly European sensibilities, the operatic tone, the moral ambiguity, the stylized violence, would be recognized as revolutionary contributions that revitalized the Western genre. What critics initially rejected as not American enough eventually transformed how Americans viewed their own cultural mythology. Perhaps the most poignant irony was personal. The film that nearly destroyed relationships between its key collaborators ultimately bound them together in cinema history. Despite the conflicts, both Eastwood and Wallach later cited the film as a creative turning point in their careers, a challenging experience that permanently altered their approach to their craft. Leone had set out to deconstruct the American Western. In doing so, he inadvertently created the definitive Western, one that would influence generations of filmmakers who grew up watching the compromised version he had fought against. But the story doesn't end there. The film's journey was just beginning. The initial American release of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly performed modestly at the box office. Profitable, but not extraordinary. Critics remained divided. What happened next represents one of cinema's most remarkable second acts. As the years passed, something unexpected occurred. The film's reputation began to grow rather than fade. College campuses started showing late-night screenings. Revival houses found that Leone's westerns consistently sold out. A new generation of film students and critics began re-examining the film not as a genre oddity, but as a landmark artistic achievement. The breakthrough moment came when influential American critics began to reverse earlier dismissals. By the mid-1970s, the film regularly appeared on lists of the greatest westerns ever made, then on lists of greatest films, period. What changed wasn't the film, but the cultural context in which it was viewed. In 1977, film critic Philip French wrote, "What seemed like excess now reveals itself as vision." Leone wasn't corrupting the Western. He was stripping away its sentimental veneer to expose the genre's true, morally complex heart. The film's visual language and Morricone's score penetrated popular culture in ways that transcended the original context. The musical theme became one of the most recognizable pieces of film music ever composed, referenced and parodied countless times. Leone's extreme close-ups of squinting eyes became shorthand for tension in visual media, from commercials to music videos. For the actors, the legacy proved transformative. Though Eastwood had been reluctant during production, the man with no name persona, established in the Dollars trilogy, became the foundation for his subsequent stardom. The minimalist, morally ambiguous hero he embodied for Leone would evolve into Dirty Harry and numerous other iconic roles that defined his career. Van Cleef, whose career had been floundering before Leone cast him, found himself reinvented as one of cinema's most compelling villains. After The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, he never lacked for work again, starring in dozens of subsequent westerns that traded on his iconic screen presence. For Leone, the film's growing stature emboldened his artistic ambitions. Each subsequent project grew more elaborate and personal, culminating in his epic Once Upon a Time in America, a film that might never have been possible without the eventual recognition of his Western masterpiece. The most significant breakthrough, however, was cinematic. Leone's techniques, the juxtaposition of extreme close-ups with extreme wide shots, the extension of tension through editing, the use of music as a narrative device, rather than mere accompaniment, influenced filmmakers from Martin Scorsese to Quentin Tarantino, Steven Spielberg, to Christopher Nolan. What began as an Italian reinterpretation of an American genre had become a universal cinematic language. The influence of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly extends far beyond its immediate success, creating ripples that continue to shape cinema and popular culture decades later. Most directly, the film transformed how westerns were made. After Leone, directors could no longer rely on simplistic white hat, black hat morality. The genre's visual language evolved to incorporate more extreme compositions, gritty violence, and morally compromised protagonists. Films from Sam Peckinpah's The Wild Bunch to Clint Eastwood's own Unforgiven bear Leone's unmistakable influence. Leone showed us that westerns could be art. Eastwood reflected years later. He took what had become a formulaic genre and turned it into something operatic and profound. After him, we all had to raise our game. Beyond westerns, the film's technical innovations transformed action cinema broadly. Leone's approach to building tension, extending moments that other directors would rush through, became a template for how to choreograph and edit confrontation scenes across genres. The film's cultural footprint extends into unexpected territories. The Mexican standoff, 3 or more characters simultaneously holding each other at gunpoint, became a cinematic trope, largely because of the cemetery scene. Directors as diverse as John Woo, Quentin Tarantino, and Edgar Wright have paid explicit homage to the sequence. Morricone's score revolutionized film music, demonstrating how a soundtrack could function as a narrative voice rather than mere accompaniment. The main theme, with its distinctive howl resembling a coyote's call, has been sampled, covered, or referenced in everything from hip-hop tracks to television commercials. Even the fashion world felt the impact. The poncho Eastwood wore became a style icon, periodically returning to fashion prominence in the decades since. The film's overall aesthetic, dusty minimalism, punctuated by extreme close-ups, influenced photography, advertising, and music video direction. For the actors, the ripple effects were personal and professional. Eastwood took Leone's lessons in visual storytelling and minimalist performance into his own directorial career. Van Cleef found himself typecast as a villain, but that typecasting provided steady work for the remainder of his career. Wallach, previously known primarily as a serious stage actor, discovered a new range that kept him working in film well into his 90s. Most significantly, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly helped establish a truly international cinema. Its success demonstrated that language barriers and cultural differences could be overcome, that films didn't need to be made in Hollywood to achieve worldwide impact. The film that emerged from conflict and compromise had become one of cinema's most influential texts, studied in film schools and referenced by filmmakers seeking to understand the essence of visual storytelling. But why does it continue to resonate so powerfully decades after its release? Beyond its technical brilliance and cultural influence, the good, the bad, and the ugly endures because it speaks to something fundamental about human nature and morality. Strip away the gunfights and gold, and you find a film addressing timeless questions about greed, loyalty, and survival. The film's central insight, that moral labels like good and bad are arbitrary and situational, feels increasingly relevant in our complex world. Leone presents three men, each pursuing self-interest through different methods. The film never judges them. It merely observes how their choices play out against the chaotic backdrop of war and frontier justice. Leone understood something essential about America that many American directors missed, filmmaker Martin Scorsese once observed. He saw that the frontier myth contained darkness and contradiction, that the line between hero and villain was often just a matter of perspective. This moral ambiguity allows the film to transcend its genre trappings. Unlike westerns that simplistically glorified conquest and individualism, Leone's vision acknowledged the messy reality behind America's frontier mythology. This complexity allows contemporary viewers to engage with the film without the discomfort that more straightforwardly jingoistic westerns might provoke. Visually, the film remains striking because it operates on an almost subconscious level. Leone understood that faces tell stories words cannot. His famous extreme close-ups, eyes narrowing, sweat dripping, subtle micro-expressions, communicate complex emotional states without dialogue. This visual language crosses cultural and linguistic barriers, making the film universally accessible. The performances continue to impress because they balance archetypal simplicity with surprising depth. Eastwood's Blondie embodies stoic competence without ever seeming superhuman. Van Cleef's Angel Eyes represents implacable evil without becoming cartoonish. And Wallach's Tuco contains multitudes, comical yet dangerous, pathetic yet resourceful. Actor and director Ben Affleck noted, "What strikes me most about revisiting this film is how much emotional truth comes through, despite the stylization. These aren't just poses. There's genuine humanity, even in the smallest moments." The film's enduring appeal also stems from its unique tone, a precise balance of cynicism and romanticism. Leone depicts a world governed by greed and violence, yet films it with such beauty and grandeur that we can't help but be seduced. This contradiction creates a viewing experience that feels simultaneously critical and celebratory of the Western myth. Most profoundly, the film endures because it resulted from genuine creative struggle. The conflicts, compromises, and near disasters of its production somehow alchemized into art. What began as a troubled international production became a testament to cinema's power to transmute experience, both the characters and the filmmakers, into something transcendent. When viewed with knowledge of what happened behind the scenes, every frame of the good, the bad, and the ugly takes on new significance. The exhaustion in the actors' eyes is real. The tension in their interactions reflects genuine, creative differences. The triumphant moments feel earned because they were. This is the hidden layer that transforms how we experience Leone's masterpiece. The next time you watch The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, look beyond the iconic standoffs and quotable lines. See the film through the lens of what you now know, the conflicts that forged it, the compromises that shaped it, and the vision that survived against considerable odds. Notice how Wallach's near-death experiences inform his performance's desperate energy. Recognize the genuine tension between Eastwood and Leone in Blondie's detached demeanor. Appreciate Van Cleef's physical suffering, channeled into Angel Eyes' menacing stillness. These aren't just performances. They're documents of a creative struggle that paralleled the story being told. A film that began in chaos and confrontation, has become a cornerstone of cinematic history, studied, celebrated, and continuously rediscovered by new generations of viewers. The painful production that nearly broke its creators instead cemented their legacies. If you found these revelations about the good, the bad, and the ugly illuminating, hit that like button and share. Which detail most surprised you in the comments? Sometimes the greatest art emerges from the most difficult circumstances, a truth Leone and his reluctant collaborators proved beyond any doubt.